Hi, everyone. Good evening, and thank you for joining the second section. So this section is brought to you by the Nigerian Azure community, and it's promising to be an enriching section. So we just finished one section on Azure Security Center and best practices that you need for your cloud security. Now we are into the second section, which will be on securing data using Azure encryption services. Is features such as Key Vault and Disk Encryption is going to be explained and discussed in this section. So I'd like to introduce the speaker in the person of Titilope Bello. Titilope Bello is a technical manager who is passionate about transforming the technology landscape for organizations. He has several years of experience in the technology space, and she's going to be speaking to us today and sharing her knowledge to the community. Thank you, Titilope Bello, for joining us. I want to welcome you to the section. Titi, are you there? Hi.
Yeah, hi, good evening.
Okay, good evening. Thank you for giving us the time to share what you know, what you have in you with the community. So the floor is yours now. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Let me just share my screen very quickly. Okay, sorry. A moment. Trying to. Okay. Can see my screen, right?
Yes, it's coming up. Okay, it's visible now.
Okay. Thank you very, very much. Good afternoon, good evening to you all, and good morning, in case we have people joining us from somewhere outside Nigeria. Okay, so thank you, Imaf, again for the introduction. And I want to also welcome you all once again to the second session of today. And in this session today, we are going to be talking about encryption services in Azure, but with a focus on Azure Key Vault and Disk Encryption. So just sit tight while we move on. Sorry, I think a slide is missing. That's to introduce myself. Yes, Imo has already introduced me, but I'll just briefly introduce myself again. My name is Titilope Bello, and I am a Microsoft certified trainer, and I'm a subject matter expert for Microsoft 365 and Azure. I also work with Azure Limited, and when I'm not working, when I'm not doing anything, I just like to watch crime and investigation movie, and I love cooking and singing. So that's just a bit about me. So now going back into the business of today, we are going to be talking about encryption, that's Azure encryption services, and then we'll look at Azure Key Vault, and we will also look at disk encryption, and then finally we'll we'll see a little demo on how to make use of the encryption or how to create a virtual machine in Azure and then encrypt the disk that the virtual machine is using. So, so if we are to say what is encryption or why encryption really, so we are looking at Azure encryption services. It provides a secure services or scalable services and efficient way for IT
My hand, I can't hear again. I don't know if it's from my hand only.
I think we lost Titi. So pending when she's back, just exercise a little patience. She'll be back soon. I guess there's network downtime. So
Yes, yes,
okay,
I
she's
lost
back.
connection.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm back. Apologies for that. So yes, I was talking about Azure encryption services, and it's a service that provides a secure, a scalable, and efficient way for IT professionals, organizations, and developers to protect their data that is stored in Azure. So it's a very critical service, considering if you have to, now you go into Azure, or to the cloud rather, generally, there are a lot
Hello,
of
boss.
things. Hello, can you hear
Yeah.
me? Okay, sorry. All right, so there are a lot of attacks that are out there, and as technology are evolving, attackers are also becoming and using more sophisticated tools to get access or unauthorized access into organizational data. So encrypting your data is one of the most important steps that you can take to ensure that you are able to prevent your data from being accessed by unauthorized users, or to prevent it from data breach. And then advantage of this service in Azure is actually is wide, in the sense that you are able to, out of the box, it offer encryption services for certain features, certain services, while you have to, intentionally, or intentionally enable the encryption services on other type of resources that you have created in Azure. So let's look just briefly on what is encryption itself, right? Encryption is actually the process of converting plain text data into a ciphertext type or form. So when you do this, what happens to the data is that it makes it unreadable. For anybody to be able to read this data or get access to it, they must be provided, or they must be able to provide the decryption key. So when you convert your data into this ciphertext format, you will need a key, or a key is also created for you to be able to decrypt it. If anybody get access to this key, to this data that is already encrypted, if they do not have access to the data, to the key, then there is no way for them to be able to decrypt it. It just when they open the data, it look like gibberish. It look like just a combination of alphanumeric characters or special symbols within it, and you are like, what's this? So, but actually it's because it's been encrypted, right? So the when you come to encryption, there are two types. There is what we call symmetric encryption and then asymmetric encryption, right? And when we talk about symmetric encryption, it has to do with the way the keys are being used, right? In the in encryption, when you use symmetric encryption, right, it uses what we call just a single key. So there are two in this encryption business. There are two parties or two things involved. You need to have two keys. One key can be known to anybody, but there's what we call a private key. So that key that is known to anybody is the public key. Now there's what we call a private key. That private key is only known to you who did the encryption of this data. So if you have to give this data to somebody to be able to use it, then you must provide the private key to them as well in order for them to be able to decrypt the data and be able to make use of this resource or the data that you have provided to them. Now, the second one is the second encryption option or type is the asymmetric encryption type. This uses two key combination. In this case, you will need both the private key and the public key. Now, the public key is used to encrypt the data, while the private key is used to decrypt that particular data. But in the case of symmetric, it's just one key that you use to encrypt and decrypt at the same time. So the symmetric key encryption option is very fast when you use it. It's very, very fast compared to asymmetric option. Please give me a moment. I think I'm going to change. Oh yeah, I knew it. I was using wrong. Sorry, just a minute. Okay. Okay, yeah. Apologies for that. I think I was using a wrong deck. So just for me to kind of okay, I think I'll just briefly go over this again. So I was talking about the encryption option. We have the symmetric and then the asymmetric. Now, the symmetric, like I said earlier, uses one key and they are faster. They are faster. They are very, very fast when you use that compared to when you use a public and private key combination option. And you can use it to protect large data store. Right, you can use it to protect large data store. And why the other one, which is the asymmetric one, is you use the two key pair, the private key, the public key to encrypt, the private key to decrypt. So just as the name suggests, right, the public key can be made available to anyone without compromising the encrypted data, right? Like I said, the public key is known to anybody, so it can actually be available, be given to anybody. But the private key, before anybody can get access to it, they have to be people you actually give that access to be able to make use of the data that you have given to them. So now, because of the two key involved or the two key pair involved or this extra exchange of key that's involved, it is slower than the symmetric counterpart, right, of the encryption service. So again, I think briefly I've talked about this earlier, and then but just for you to know again, like I said, there are two key types: the symmetric and asymmetric. Now, encrypting data is very crucial for protecting is a very crucial process for protecting that data from unauthorized access and breaches. So it's adding additional layer of security for your data. Now, Azure encryption services actually offer it can be integrated for other services apart from disk. I've just talked about, we're focusing on disk encryption, but it can be integrated into other services like app services, like database services, storage, other storage services that you have in Azure. You can actually integrate, you can actually encrypt your data that are stored in each of those applications or services that you have, right? And then the services are they are quite user-friendly and help organizations to comply with, most importantly, regulatory requirement or certain security requirement that might be necessary. So what's the importance of data security generally, right? Data security is there or is important to protect sensitive information. Now, when we say sensitive information, they can be categorized into different types of data. You have the personal data and you have non-personal data. You have things like financial, part of personal data can be financial data, right? That's things about you, things about your bank account, information about everything that have to do with, if anybody get access to that particular data, they can clear your money in the bank, right? Or it can cost you maybe something that can cost you a lot of money, or in term of cash, or in term of physical cash, right? And other information that can lead to things like reputational damage of an organization. You know, certain data, if certain data get leaked, especially when it comes to a business, before that business is able to redeem their image, if it is bad, if it's reporting bad, or if whatever at all, if that data get leaked, before the customer starts trusting the business organization again, it might take a while, and which means they will lose customer, they will lose money, they will lose a lot of things. So data security overall is very important. Other type of data that, like I said, I talk about compliance. So you look at health organization, for instance, they have to ensure that the record of patients is very, very confidential. They are mostly highly confidential. Look at health sector, you look at legal sector, those are environments that information are very, very important and must be kept private. So when you encrypt or you introduce any form of security, you are also meeting some of this regulatory compliance or regulatory requirement based on your business, or as your business demands them. One is also, you can also use that also to meet the GDPR. We all know, a lot of us know what GDPR is. You know, you have to protect the data of and the EU, that both not only, it's not applying just to the EU residents anymore, it's applying to anybody worldwide where they can ask for their data to be deleted at any time, and you have to honor that, or you ensure that where you are keeping it is encrypted, is saved, and cannot be accessed by anybody. So data encryption is actually helping to fulfill the confidentiality of the CIA triad of cybersecurity, right? Or of security. You have integrity, you have confidentiality, and you have accessibility, right? So this is one data encryption is helping you to meet one of these requirements of this. Now, data breaches are increasingly common today and can have severe consequences. I've talked about what it can do in terms of reputational damages to an organization, in terms of financial loss or even personal loss of data, right? So it's very important we encrypt the services that you have in Azure with Azure encryption. Okay, so now when it comes to Azure encryption, there are components or there are services that make up the encryption services in Azure. And then, yes, like I said again, Azure provide a very robust mechanism for you to protect your data. The type of data we are talking about now is not just data that is sitting down in one place. So that is data at rest. When you store data in a storage or wherever location you store it and it's just sitting there and waiting for you to use it at any time you want to use it or get access to it at any time you need that access. That is called data at rest. Why it's also protecting data in transit. Now, there are different technique or different ways by which you can go about that, right? But you should ensure that you protect both data at rest and data in transit to ensure security and compliance within or with industry standards. So these services help you to safeguard sensitive data through a few components like the Azure Key Vault, right? Azure Key Vault is providing you like a centralized cloud service for storing storing sensitive information like secrets. When you say secrets can be passwords. They can be connection string to your database, right? They can be keys, right? Keys now are a form of that they are encryption key for certificate and then even certificates themselves, right? Azure Key Vault can provide that centralized storage location or management of those three types of services. Then we have the Azure encryption, Azure Disk Encryption is also a component of encryption services in Azure, right? And this allows you to encrypt operating system and disk or data disk in your virtual machines. You can protect or you can encrypt both virtual machine disk in Windows VM and you can encrypt disk in Linux VM. Now, the Windows VM uses or leverage the BitLocker technologies in Windows, right? That's what it uses to encrypt the disk for a Windows machine. While a Linux machine uses DM crypt for encrypting a disk within a Linux machine. And then data encryption, or the third one is the data at rest and data at rest and data in transit. I've already talked about it a little bit. So part of the services that allow you to protect data at rest and in transit, yes, storage disk is one of it. And then you have other storage services. It's called Azure Storage Service Encryption, that's SSE. And this automatically encrypts data stored in services like Azure Blob Storage, Azure File Storage, or any other storage services that you set up or create in Azure. Then you also have TLS, that's Transport Layer Security. This Transport Layer Security is actually the one that is responsible for encrypting data that is on the move, data on the move. So you have communication between the client and the server. While the client is requesting for information from the server needs to respond to the client with the data it has requested for. Now, this exchange of information between the client and the server is encrypted using TLS or SSL TLS to encrypt it. So some of the things that you can use to meet this TLS requirement are mostly certificate. That's SSL certificate, right? So, but we are focusing today, like we said, we're just focusing on disk encryption. Moving on, let's talk now about Azure Key Vault service in Azure. Azure Key Vault is a secure cloud service that manage cryptographic key. That's cryptographic keys, right, in Azure. Not only keys, it also manage secrets. I said the other time, secrets are passwords or connection strings to your applications or databases and certificate. Now, it acts as a central repository for managing and accessing this sensitive information. And also, like I said, you can integrate it with services across Azure environment. Now, in what sense? Let's say I create a password for a particular service, maybe even for virtual machine that is hosted in Azure. And now I need somebody to be able to work on this service. There are ways by which I can provide access to the virtual machine or the application that I'm hosting. I can either create another credential for the user, but that's credential now, I mean username and password. But creating username and password for the person, I'll have to provide the password to the person some one way or the other. And if it's now an application that every time I need to access that application, I need to make use of that password, right? It means in the process of transferring the password from one person to another for that particular application, the password could get lost, it could get stolen, it could get into the hand of a wrong person. So in order not to pass the password, maybe like in plain text or something between two persons, then you can use Azure Key Vault to actually store this password and configure your application each time anybody needs to access a resource that require that application to talk to maybe a database who will request a connection string or a username and password from that particular application, then they can both easily talk to the Azure Key Vault. Yes.
Can you hear me? Sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
Olumide is saying that he's not seeing your screen. Can I confirm? Is everyone seeing the screen, please? I can see the screen, Olumide. I guess you need to leave and rejoin.
I can see.
Yeah, I can see from my end.
Okay, Olumide, you can leave and rejoin.
All right.
I will admit again. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So now, if we look at though we'll get there, but if I want to say maybe quickly on in which scenario will you be using Azure Key Vault, right? Let's look at a situation where you have an application or you have an API or you created an API. You want this API to connect to maybe Azure Active Directory, for instance, to pick some information from the Azure Active Directory. Now, one thing you do is when you create the API, there are keys that you create to be able to establish connection between the API and the application that you are going to be talking to. Now, this key can actually be stored in Azure Key Vault so that anytime the API needs to make connection, you first need to reach out to Azure Key Vault, receive a token, get a token from the Key Vault, and present it to the Azure AD for it to get access to the particular information that you need to pick. So sorry, my image, there's a user that is sitting somewhere here that is making a request. He's making a request to the Azure AD. You need to access the application. Now, his request, he requires authentication. This is the application. You reach out to the application, and application need to talk to the database. So before you talk to the database, you need to present a key or a secret or certificate, whichever way it is being configured. So that application need to travel down to Azure Key Vault to receive a token. And the token is now presented and is able to access the service that he wanted to access. So the features of Azure Key Vault are key management, right? It provides, it enables key management, right? For securing storage and handling the cryptographic key. Why secrets, the secret management have to do with saving or safe storage for your passwords. That's, we know password is confidential. Safe it provides a safe storage for your password, provide a safe storage for your connection string for your databases and other applications. And then the services also offer what we call certificate management. So if you have different services in Azure, and each of those services, maybe like your website, you have web server, web application, other web application, and each of them need to make use of certificate. You can actually store this certificate information, you store it in Azure Key Vault. And anytime you need to use it, you configure your application to actually go to the Key Vault and receive the certificate from it to authenticate. Additionally, you have what we call access policy. So access policy defines rules for users, user access to the resources. So if a user needs to access an application that needs to query a key from the Key Vault, right? Does this user have access to be able to go there? So that is what the access policy is for. It allows you to be able to create rules or give access to user and control what the user can do based on that policy that you have created. So this way, you ensure that sensitive information is only available to authorized individuals at all time, right? Finally, is the integration, like I said earlier. Azure Key Vault integrates with services like Entra, that's Microsoft Entra. It also integrates with services like Key Vault Manage HSM. HSM is Hardware Security Module. So this is available for customers who want to manage their own key and use this type of service to manage their key. So that's one other feature of Azure Key Vault. It allows you to be able to either, when you are doing encryption, you have either to create, to accept Microsoft key, or you bring your own key. Now, when you bring your key, you need a place to store it. You can either store it in Key Vault or you use Key Vault that have integration with HSM. So moving on, right, let's look at a few use cases for Azure Key Vault. One of the use cases is protecting the data in your database. I've said, when you create a database, whether it is SQL, any type of database that you create, before any application can connect to it, you need username and password. Now, you can't just give username and password to an application. You need what they call a connection string. What is a connection string? A connection string is like a URL, right? That have information like the server IP address, the username, the password, the database name that you want to connect to in that particular or on that particular server. That is what make up a connection string, right? So that string or that information is carrying every single thing that you need. Not that when the database receive that information, it will start asking you for some additional information. You now start providing them one after the other. But the connection string gives just a single statement that contains all the information that you need to access that database and perform the action you need to perform. So you can also do regular auditing and monitoring of the how the particular connection string or your database secrets are being used, right? Another instance is securing application secret. So apart from the connection to the database. There are instances where maybe an application needs to connect from itself to another services. Now, before it connect to another service, it needs to also provide a form of authentication. Now, this authentication can be in form of certificate, it can be in form of key, right? This can also be stored in Azure. This is a use case also for Azure Key Vault, right? And you are able to also configure what we call rotational services for the key. So which means it's not one single key that you use all the time. If you use a key, you create two keys, one key will be used for a period of time. So if somebody managed to get access to key one, for instance, and you have set a time for the rotation, if they are still trying to maybe use that key or crack the key or something before the time for rotation happen. Once the rotation happen, that key, the first one they have, becomes useless. Now they will need to look for how they will get the new key now. So this way, you are able to ensure that not one single key is used for a very long time. Now, the other thing is compliance requirement. This is a situation where a health institution or a health establishment is having a mandate to meet HIPAA. And part of the requirement in HIPAA is doctor-patient record confidentiality, right? So you have to ensure that you meet this. So this also allows you to be able to meet this particular requirement. Now, what are the best practices for using Azure Key Vault, right? You have, whenever you can, make sure you leverage on Azure Managed Identity, right? So access to Key Vault without storing credentials in code. So if you are a developer that you're on this call, I'm sure you are used to when you are creating, when you are developing your app, sometimes a lot of developers add code username and password within the code, within the application, which is not security best practice, right? So if in a situation where you have not considered any other form of security that can expose unnecessary information when people actually try to access that particular application, then your password can easily be exposed, right? So, but Key Vault, if you are able to use Key Vault, you are sure that you are saving that credential without add coding it in your code. Now, another best practice is to ensure that you enable what we call recovery for deleted item, right? So when you are creating your Key Vault, one of the things it's going to ask you is to set recovery for any item that is deleted. There can be a case of accidental deletion. This is not a breach now, but accidental deletion, right? And you need to be able to restore. So the default the default retention policy is actually 90 days. It's 90 days. However, you can configure it to either go beyond 90 days and what will happen when the retention policy is reached, okay? Then you should also imbibe the habit of configuring granular access policy. That is specifying, or there are rules that state who can access and manage the keys, the secret, and the certificate that are stored in your Key Vault. Then automate key rotation, right? Key and secret rotation. Like I said earlier, if you leave one key for a long time, and even the application becomes so complacent with it. So you have to ensure that you automate the key rotation. So you can set up a policy that enforces key to be rotated automatically without you going to manually do that. And you can monitor, right? You can monitor by tracking. You can use Azure Monitor and Azure Security Tester to actually track changes that is happening on your Azure Key Vault. Okay, now quickly, let's move to Azure encryption, that's disk encryption. So for Azure Disk Encryption enables you to encrypt your Windows and Linux infrastructure, Windows and Linux virtual machines rather, in your Azure or within your Azure infrastructure. So you can encrypt the disk. And like I said earlier, if you are encrypting a Windows machine, a Windows disk, right, you will be leveraging the Microsoft BitLocker feature. Why, if you are encrypting that of a Linux virtual machine, then you'll be leveraging the DM crypt feature of Linux to protect the volume, to protect at volume level, right? Volume level encryption. Now, there are different forms of encryption. You have the disk level, you have the data level, right? Disk level is is encrypting, including the operating system and every single thing on that particular disk. While file level is not encrypting the operating system, but you can specify which particular file it is that you want, or data that you want to encrypt. So that is file level encryption. But the one we are talking about here have to do with disk level encryption or volume level encryption, right? It ensures that all data on the VM, that's on the virtual machine disk, are encrypted at rest, and they are encrypted at rest within your storage. So again, disk encryption can also integrate conveniently and seamlessly with Azure Key Vault to help you control, manage, and audit the use or the usage of the encryption keys and secrets. So if you look at this this image that we have here, the AD is actually meaning Azure Disk Encryption, while you have the other one is SSE. SSE is Azure Storage Encryption, Service Encryption. So now here you have your Key Vault that is integrated with this virtual machine, whether it's a Linux VM or a Windows VM. Now, Azure Disk is encrypted. There's an extension that is installed on your virtual machine to enable the encryption to happen. If it is a Windows, it's going to be BitLocker. If it's a Linux, it's going to be dmcrypt. Then it's encrypting both the OS disk and then the data disk. By default, when you create a virtual machine, you only have the operating system disk. You can then add other disk, like for data disk in your VM. So ensure if you are encrypting any disk, encrypt all the disk on the particular virtual machine. And we have the features include ability to protect the data at rest and protect data and application in transit, right? So then there is this transparency, like I said. If you are configuring, let's even say you've created your virtual machine before. Now you want to configure encryption. You can actually do that, and it's not going to affect or disturb anything. You don't have to make any change at all to the application or to your codes, and it seamlessly integrates with your existing workflow that you might have within your environment. So then here are the use cases as well to encrypt virtual machine disk, right? You can use it primarily to encrypt virtual machines, either encrypt, you can choose also to encrypt just the operating system or encrypt just the data disk. But best practice says make sure to encrypt all the disk if you if they are supported, if the application you are hosting on them does not have any problem with encryption, right? Then it helps organizations to comply again with data protection regulation. And this way, they can avoid legal penalties that are associated with data breaches. And additionally, it is secure, or it secures data that is stored in your cloud environment. This way you can mitigate risks that are commonly associated with cloud storage. So encrypting virtual machine disk is very, very important also for services like web application, so that you ensure that data protection and compliance with regulations are met at all times, right? Okay, then best practices as well, ensure to encrypt all the disks where and whenever possible, and store your key. Instead of managing the key manually, store it in Azure Key Vault for better control. Then take regular backup, right? Take regular backup of your encrypted disk. Regular backup. Backup is also a kind of protection and data compliance requirement for some organization. So make sure you take backup regularly. Then enforce this encryption by using Azure policy to monitor and enforce encryption across your Azure services. Right. There are situations where your users are, or people within your organization are creating resources. You can create Azure policy to ensure that as they are creating those resources, encryption is also following, right? Then one thing you have to do is to ensure that you do regular testing of your encryption processes. There is one thing to encrypt data or encrypt disk, is another thing to there's a time has come for you to make use of that data and you realize you are not able to decrypt it. So make sure you test. Regular testing is very important. Organizations, we call it drill, right? To ensure that services are working the way they are supposed to work. And so finally, let's see a few steps or demo on how to go about creating, encrypting your disk. So we're going to create a key vault and we're going to encrypt the disk for a virtual machine. And we'll see how to manage this disk, right? So give me a moment, let me switch. Okay, so we have to go into Azure environment or Azure tenants, and you can just search from here. You can search for Azure Key Vault. Right now, I don't have any resource. I don't have virtual machine, so I might actually create both the virtual machine and the key vault at the same time. So I'm just going to create a resource, right? Let's go to create a resource. Okay. Create a virtual machine first. Right. Yes, very quickly. This standard way. Lab. I'm going to leave it where it is, West Europe. Availability is required. So we can do, but we'll do window. Okay. So key management, you can see the option here. That's for encryption already is asking for key management, whether I want to use Azure platform managed, that's Azure managed key, or I want to bring my own key. But we'll leave that for now. Click create. Okay, so just give it some more time. Just it's a more time. I think this is a function of my internet. Just a moment. Okay. So now go to the virtual machine. Yeah, we're in the virtual machine. Let's go to disk. And So that's, I went to the disk setting, right? And from here, I can choose encryption where encryption at host level is what I want to do, right? Currently is not enabled. So now here, come down here, and this is the setting, and then we click disk to encrypt. We are going to select, we want to encrypt both the OS and the data disk, although there's no data disk on this server, it's only hosts. So now here is asking us already this integration to integrate with Azure Key Vault, right? I don't have anyone created. So we're going to create a new one so that you can see the process of creating Azure Key Vault. So automatically, as usual, any resource you create in Azure, you need a resource group and a subscription to host it. One important thing is the region where your virtual machine is hosted. If you do not want the key to travel across a region, then ensure that you are creating your key vault is existing in the same region as your virtual machine or as its resources that you want to protect. So I'm just going to give it a name and call it TT Key Vault. TT Key Vault, and okay, I think I've used this some time ago. All right, so now pricing tier, there are two options. There is standard, there is premium. The premium is what gives you access to be able to use HSM module, right? You know, we talked a bit about it. So now this is where we're talking about in terms of best practices, right? Recovery option. So anytime you delete any content from your key, this setting now, they are for your key vault, right? Anytime you delete any resource from your key, there is a default 90 days off to retain that particular delete. So it goes into what we call soft deletion state. Once 90 days is reached, then it will permanently delete that particular resource that you have deleted. Okay. Just a minute. Please. Okay, sorry for the break in transmission. So like I said, once you delete, if you did not make change to this default retention setting, then automatically after 90 days, it's going to delete that particular resource, whether it's a key or it's a secret or it's a certificate that you have deleted from the vault, right? So if your requirement, so every organization have retention policy that must be set for maybe different type of service resources or different type of data, right? If your requirement says you need beyond 90 days, then you need to make change here, okay? Then there's this purge protection, right? Purge protection allow key, vault, and object to be purged during retention period. So if we enable it, so this one now said if we enable purge protection, it enforces a mandatory retention period for deleted vaults and vault objects. Okay. So what is if you take note of the two? Now, if we don't enable this setting, what it means is if you delete a resource from your vault or you delete a vault, normally it's supposed to wait for 90 days. But you can choose to go and permanently delete it. if you run a PowerShell command to permanently get rid of it, it's going to go away. It will not tell you because you have. So it's the same thing as when you delete a file from your system, it goes into your deleted item folder. But if you go into your deleted item folder to go and delete it, it is gone permanently. So the same thing is applying here. If you enable this, it means whatever retention policy and the retention time or period you have set, anything deleted, either a vault or within this vault, will comply with that date that you have set. But if you disable it, then it will not, there will be no compliance with that. So we are going to leave it as enabled. And we'll go next, right? Here now, one of the things that you have to do is to configure access for the key vault. So this access configuration. And then there's this permission. So we give it permission. What type of permission? Either role-based access control. Role-based access control means you have to give permission based on role. So anytime you need to give access to somebody, you have to go to the key vault and go to IAM. So you need to go through the IAM to give access based on role, whether the person is a developer or you need virtual machine manager or whatever, you have to select the role and assign. But you can also select this other option. When you select key vault access policy, right? So you have two options. Remember, we said we configure access policy. When you select key vault access policy, you see what happened here. It's showing us the access policy. By default, it has given access to me that created it. And you can see the type of access that we have here. The permission is I can get, I can list, I can update, I can create, import, and delete, and many more on this particular key vault, right? Then secret permission, I can create keys, I can create secrets, I can backup, recover, delete. The same thing for certificate. So because we want to go with access policy, we are going to continue like this. So if you have any other person, you need to also be able to manage this key vault and everything in it. You can actually add another one here, our additional one. And after this, you can go into the property of the key vault to go and manage it as well. So we'll click, we'll leave it as this. I'm the only one for now, and we click next. Okay, now this is access in terms of access, whether you want public access or it will only be a private endpoint. So if you want public access, it means resources or application will be able to query the key vault for either key, secret, or certificate from over the internet. But if you want to disable public access from it, your requirement might is to give it additional security even on the key vault, right? You have to enable what we call private endpoint, and that one you have to configure it. So currently or right now, we are going to leave it as publicly accessible. And the next thing is tag. It's always good to give tag, but we'll leave that as it is, and we'll review. Once the review is done, then we can click create. Here are the settings. So currently, if you look at the access configuration, Azure Virtual Machine deployment is disabled. Azure resource manager for template deployment is disabled. Then Azure encryption for volume is disabled. Why? Okay, because we are creating. When we finish, we'll go back to the virtual machines that we are working on. So we're just waiting and we click create. It's running. It's taking quite some time.
Hi, well done, Siti. Please, while the lab creation, while the key vault creation is ongoing, if you have any question, feel free to ask.
To ask, yes,
Yeah.
please.
We can wrap up it.
So here we have created our key vault, and then now we need to create this key vault is just an empty key vault. Now we need to create a key, right? Currently the key vault is empty. So I'll just create a new key. Who is that?
Hello, Titi. Good evening.
Can you meet?
Hi,
Okay, go ahead. Good evening.
Please, I just want to ask, is this call recorded, please?
Yes, it's recorded.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Please, how can I get it? I mean, how can it, will it be shared in the group?
If you check the group, the chat, I pasted the community link. So it will be uploaded to the community YouTube. So you just check the community YouTube, check the chat, you see the link to the YouTube channel.
YouTube. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm creating a key. Just give it, so we know it is for who. That's to be And now I need to select the key type, although it is not selectable. What the key type we are giving here is RSA. And here, this is key size. So you have to specify how, depending on how strong you want your encryption to be. The default, we just leave it as this. And then set date, that's activation date. Let it activate, that's today. 6, yes, that's fine. And then set expiration date. Can choose to set expiration date if we want, but let's leave this for now. And we click create. Then you enable it, ensure it is enabled. So do we have any question why this is creating?
ITT, I just have a one question about around the type of keys. You made mention of symmetric and asymmetric keys. So in an organization, which of for best practice or for the one that you feel that can be very good for adoption, if I want to implement, will I go for, is it better to go for symmetric or asymmetric? Which of them is the best?
So talking about the best, right? You have to consider what's required. Now, if you're talking about speed, symmetric is best.
Okay.
But I would say asymmetric is more secure because the keys that you're using are different, right?
Okay.
So if everybody have the public key, quite all right. But the private key, if you don't give it out, somebody cannot have it. But what it means if you use symmetric keys, if somebody get access to the key, they've gotten access to the entire stuff, that any resource at all that is making use of that particular key. So if you are looking at speed, you might think of symmetric. But if additional security is involved, then you have to look at the asymmetric option of it.
Okay. For security best practice, it's asymmetric. Yes. Okay.
Asymmetric, yes.
All right. Okay.
So I'll just click save here. Okay. Network access bypass. Oh, okay. This was before now. Right. Yeah, almost there. Almost there. Any other question? Okay, so while this is creating, right, we can go into Key Vault. It out here. And see what is happening. So here is the Key Vault that we created earlier. And these are the properties. So let's say I want to give additional person access now. Remember, we had two options for access. We have access policy and we had role-based. If we have selected role-based access control, right, this is where we will have gone to go and give anybody that we need to have access to this environment. We have to go and assign, add a role assignment here and give the person access. But we used access policy. So this is my own current access now. If I need to give any other person, like I said, all I need to do is to just click create to give any other
we have a
person
question
access.
from Chisholm.
Okay.
In the chat, she asked if a symmetric key gets into the hand of another person not in the organization within the time frame which the keys are not expired, is there any workaround to block the user from accessing your environment in the vault?
Okay. Okay, so that's where we talk about key rotation. So in that case, once you have a field or a should I say hint that the key has gotten into somebody's wrong hand, even though the time maybe for the rotation has not elapsed, you can actually go and manually rotate the key. Once you manually rotate the key, that first key becomes useless, right?
Now, Titi, how about the time taking for you to go manually rotate this key? You know, the hackers will not waste time. He or she will strike immediately. So what happens?
Yeah, exactly.
Is there a form of integration with maybe a monitoring Azure Monitor or alerting
Yes,
system?
that's what I
Is
said.
there any automation?
I said earlier. Yes,
Okay.
I said earlier, you can integrate it with Azure Monitor and Security Center and do your monitoring from there. Yes, and then you can audit also who have access to the key at any time.
Okay, thank you.
So now, if I go now into the key section, these are the objects for this particular key vault. And remember, we created a key just now while creating the virtual machine called encrypt test VM. So this is that particular key. So let's see the settings of the key and see where we can rotate.
You have just 3 minutes left, Titi.
3 minutes left, okay.
Yeah, 6:15. Yeah.
All right. Okay, so I think my internet now. Internet now is misbehaving, but I guess there's no more question. So if we are not able to, maybe we can have another session another time to finish it and look at other area of key vault management, where we can be able to configure the monitoring and see all those things.
Okay. Thank you very much, Titi. Thank you for your time. Thank you, everybody, for joining. The section continues next week. I've shared the link to one of the sessions that we have next week. I've also shared the second one, so you need to register to attend. This is the second link for section 2 next week. So this section is to empower you with the skill that you need on Microsoft Azure, and that will enable you to enter into the market. So learning doesn't stop here. You can go further to Titi. Do you have any further learning links to share to the audience?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I will just post it.
Okay, so look out for the link. Once you get the link, click and go and learn more. Thank you once again for your time. See you next week. Don't miss out next week.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.